nobody to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, coming up today, we've got Kevin Woodford, I was going to say the wonderful, but we've got wonderful, and Ali Mirage. They're going to be doing the paper review for us. And we've got a political roundup of the week from John Rentoul, and what a week it's been.
We're also going to be speaking about MPs who are standing down prematurely, including former GB News presenter Deanna Davison, who announced that yesterday, when we're going to be speaking to an MP who stood down prematurely at the 2015 general election. And do you know what the Coffin Club is? Well, you certainly will. If you don't know, keep watching because you will find out. And later on in the show, we'll also be talking to Julian Knight, the chairman of the DCMS Select Committee, about the coverage of the World Cup by the BBC. And as ever, we want to hear from you today, so to get involved, email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before we start with all of that, here are your latest headlines with the wonderful Tatiana.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It is 1 minute past 10. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom. The London Fire Brigade's commissioner has accepted the organisation is institutionally racist and misogynistic. Andy Rowe told the BBC he was heartbroken and has vowed change following an independent review into the LFB's culture. The report revealed accounts from a black firefighter who had a noose placed by his locker, women being groped and people having their helmets filled with urine. The review was commissioned after a trainee firefighter took his own life in 2020. Well, London Fire Brigade bosses have said the behaviour is not acceptable and welcomed recommendations of change made by the review. Rail strikes by train drivers continue today, with more travel disruption expected for passengers. Members of ASLEF across 11 train operators will walk out in a dispute over pay, meaning a significantly reduced service. The General Secretary of ASLEF is due to meet the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, next week to discuss the dispute. Over 250 social housing tenants are meeting today for the launch of an official resident-led panel to improve unsafe conditions. The Housing Secretary wants to end tenants being denied a proper voice. Michael Gove is aiming to crack down on unsafe housing conditions following the death of 2-year-old Awab Ishaq, who died from a respiratory condition linked to prolonged exposure to mould. The death of a man at the Manston Migrant Processing Centre may have been caused by a bacterial infection. That's according to the Home Office. An investigation is currently ongoing and the coroner hasn't made a final conclusion on the cause of the death. It's believed the man arrived in the UK on a small boat just a week before he died. The government say they're offering vaccinations for the infection at the Manston Centre. British military intelligence says Russia is removing nuclear warheads from old cruise missiles before using them for attacks on Ukraine. The MOD says the move highlights Moscow's low stock of long-range missiles. It's after Ukraine's President Zelensky says 6 million people are still without power after a series of rocket attacks earlier this week. England manager Gareth Southgate played down boos by disappointed fans following the Lions' draw with the USA in the World Cup last night. And with that, England missed out on a chance to guarantee a place in the last 16, while supporters at a fan zone in South London were furious by the result, throwing cups and spraying drinks. Well, England can still make it to the knockout stages, though, but this match has piled on the pressure heading into Tuesday's clash with Wales. Former English football manager Sam Allardyce says England could still win the tournament.
There's enough experience in the backroom staff, the manager, there's enough experience in the squad now, having gone through 2 tournaments, that they've got the tools to win this competition. But Gareth needs to use the squad to its full potential, and that means, for me, quite a few changes for the next game.
Meanwhile, former US international Eric Wijnaldum told us he's looking forward to the upcoming clash between Wales and England.
This is an England side that is very capable of exploding. We saw that in the first game. Maybe they took their foot off the gas against us today, but that game against Wales is something that we won't miss. I'm going to be watching 2 televisions. The games happen at the same time, but that game is just as interesting and fascinating as our game against Iran. A lot of political implications there, let's say.
While some England fans spoke of their disappointment following last night's result.
I thought it was a bit underwhelming. Not long was cracking off, was there?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Grealish should have been on earlier. Make some substitutions earlier, Gareth. I feel like he was very happy to settle for a point there. And he should have gone for it.
So we came all the way here from Washington, D.C. We were in Cardiff on Monday for the Wales-USA game. We're here in London for USA-England. There's nowhere else I'd rather be.
The Met Office has issued yellow weather warnings for rain and strong winds for large parts of the UK this weekend. Conditions will affect southern England, Wales and Scotland. The warnings in Wales and England will come into force at 2 p.m. today and will stay in place until 3 a.m. tomorrow morning. Forecasters say there's also going to be travel disruption as a result. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Tatiana. Well, let's get straight into our top stories this morning alongside our 2 wonderful guests. Yes, we're joined by the TV presenter and celebrity chef, Kevin Woodford, and columnist at The Article, Ali Mirage. So, Kevin, we'll start with you.
OK, so I'm picking up a story that was in yesterday's Mail. And the precursor to that is, as a child, my parents read me fairy tales. And nothing scared me. And I read them to my children, didn't have a problem at all. And even my mother, I remember when I couldn't sleep at night, she'd come upstairs and she used to say, if you don't go to sleep now, the bogeyman's going to come and get you. And then I was terrified. He was under the bed
when the lights went out.
Exactly. But I was wrong. After all these years, I put my hands up and apparently I'm out of order, because a survey of 2,000 Britons recently, aged between 18 and 60, found that 9 out of 10 adults under 30 felt that fairy tales are inappropriate and they're outdated. And these stories promote outdated gender stereotypes, the best example being the princess that needed to be saved by a man. Right, we know the story, even though the fact that he kissed her inappropriately, but that saved her life and brought her back to life. The argument there is that, for example, Sleeping Beauty, that's the one Prince Charming's kiss is considered inappropriate. Cinderella, feminists suggest that it depicts women as vindictive to one another and promotes the idea that women need to be saved by men. I'm sure you agree with that, don't you, Esther?
Oh, yeah, Philip's forever saving me.
He does, I can tell.
Usually.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's the one, Little Red Riding Hood, which is one of my favourite stories, Ali, and you'll remember this one. Over a quarter of the 18 to 29-year-olds polled considered the wolf's grandma-eating antics to be too scary. For goodness sake, folks, come on. They're fairy tale stories, they're not real. Get real with this.
Political correctness gone mad.
In my view, I mean, you know my view on this. I mean, I just think we need to stop this now.
But they're all cautionary tales, so there is meant to be that element of suspense and drama and learning things. So yeah, crack on and let's carry on.
But equally, you know, there's no criticism of the more modern stories, like David Walliams. Some of his stories are quite scary, you know, for children.
We'll prevent them listening to Little Red Riding Hood and instead let them play Fortnite instead. I mean, you know, or play violent computer games. The thing is, in
absolutely
20 or 30 years' time, you won't be able to read the Gruffalo.
No.
Or any of that'll all be
Well,
out,
that scares the life out of me, Philip the Gruffalo.
Time, isn't it? Yeah, exactly.
Ali?
Well, yeah, I wanted to pick up on this Qatar story in the front of the Financial Times. Qatar rethinks London stakes after ad ban. What's happening here is that TfL, Transport for London, is basically imposing a ban on all Qatari advertising. And we've got to remember that the Qatar Investment Authority owns a lot of assets, including the Shard, Harrods, Chelsea Barracks, a lot of real estate in the UK, and they're really upset about it. It's getting up their noses. And frankly, look, I believe that you can be protesting, quite rightly. Of course you can. Qatar has got a very different view on LGBTQ plus rights than we do, and we're absolutely right to express our frustration and opposition to this. That's absolutely fine. But also, let's get this in some perspective. Qatar is not the only country in the Middle East that has those views. And by the way, Transport for London is still taking advertising from the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And by the way, also, in the next 4 years, we will be having the next World Cup in the US. One of the three countries is going to host it in 2026. A country, by the way, that has the death penalty and is now going to be reimposing abortion bans in many of its states. So are we going to be wearing armbands when we go to the US? I hope we do, because otherwise it's going to be seen as a little bit
hypocritical,
to say the least. And I also think that, look, Esther, the reality is, right, that people have different... The Catholic Church is not agreed on its view on homosexual marriage, for example, right? Nor is the Anglican Church down in Africa. They've been having debates about this for years. So I'm not saying that you can't express a view. Of course you can. And we don't believe that Qatar treats its migrant workers properly, and we don't believe it treats people properly in the realms of diversity and inclusion. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't other parts of the world that are also having exactly the same debates and have a different view. And we should be able to accept people that have a different view and robustly argue against them.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's this ability to have a debate, to have consensus, to have differences. And how are you going to move people on? It is by being able to reach out and have a debate, not entrenching in your own views and pointing the finger. And as you say, hypocrisy right around the world.
But also, Esther, the other thing is that you have a situation, right, we're talking about armbands. Look at Peter Tatchell, right, someone I've had the greatest amount of respect for years. This individual has been campaigning for human rights and gay rights in particular for the best part of, 50 years, right? So, since he was in nappies, basically, he's been doing this, right? And he got again arrested in Qatar, put himself in harm's way, got kicked in the head by Robert Mugabe's bodyguards in Brussels. Let's not forget that. This is someone who actually genuinely does not believe in virtue signalling, but putting himself in harm's way to make a serious point. And I respect that. What I don't respect is endless virtue signalling, taking adverts off the tube. If you want to do that, just be consistent and take them all off. And we won't have any advertising at all.
Absolutely.
Kev?
No, completely agree. Completely agree. I mean, it's interesting as well with regards to sort of the right to comment, which I believe in firmly. There's a story. There's a councillor, Green Party councillor, that agreed with a tweet that had gone out from somebody with regards to Eddie, or is it Oddie? Eddie Izzard, not Oddie Izzard, Eddie Izzard, who'd because he's fluid gender trans woman, had used a female toilet during a Labour Party event in Sheffield. And they objected to this, and she objected to it as well, because this is a guy that is a woman and goes into a female toilet where there are sort of ladies, and they felt a bit concerned about it. So she actually objected to this as well and agreed with the tweet. She was cancelled as far as that particular party is concerned. So she was standing in Sheffield for against Eddie, right, in this particular seat in Sheffield, cancelled completely. Now for me, Eddie can do what he wants. I think somebody, if they want to identify as whatever they want to identify as, that's perfectly okay. But I do believe that there's a position that we need to take when it comes to safety of women, to be quite frank. And I wouldn't feel comfortable with regards to my daughter or my wife going into a toilet where I thought there were men going into a ladies' toilet. I really wouldn't.
I always say there's a circle of tolerance meeting intolerance. And I think to progress, we've all got to have that tolerance. And if somebody raises an objection for whatever reason, because they think they've got a strong cause, you've got to at least hear them. You can't say, I don't want to hear anybody anymore and block them out, Phil.
No, I'm going to stretch your people's tolerance levels here. Tolerance, because I'm going to lead with my chin here, Ali. Because the story of the week, from my perspective, was the front page of the Daily Mail, which basically said that MPs were now able to claim from their expenses for staff Christmas parties. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did
Ali,
see
in the
that.
thing? Yeah.
See that. Yeah.
Cue outrage. Okay, quite rightly so, in my opinion. I mean, we have a Christmas party for our. Take our staff out for Christmas lunch. We wouldn't even dream of claiming it on our expenses.
Yeah, we pay for it. I think if you asked anybody, has anybody ever claimed for this? The answer's probably no.
And so no, and of course, I think
does.
it's completely inappropriate, personally, and none of us would even think. I mean, I wouldn't even have thought of doing it, to be perfectly honest. And I think that applies to most MPs. But my question is this: this is the ground. It's a serious question that I'd like somebody to explain. Why is there always the focus here on MPs? So let me give you an illustration. I suspect that my local council will probably have a Christmas party for their staff, or Christmas, I would imagine.
Yep.
The chief executive of local councils is paid about 2.5 times what an MP's paid. Now, I suspect that the chief executive won't be paying for it out of their own pocket. I suspect the council will be picking up the tab.
Yeah, whereas we do pay for it out of our own
through
pocket.
the council tax, right? Now, where's the outrage? Why is that not on the front page of the Daily Mail? Local councils paying for Christmas parties through the council tax rather than the very highly paid chief executive. I'm sure the same might apply to the police with the chief constable and whatever, who's paid an awful lot more than MPs. And I genuinely don't understand. Why is all the focus on MPs who
weren't doing it anyway?
Aren't doing it anyway,
Well, yeah.
and not on other more highly paid people in the public sector who probably are doing it?
Well, I think you raise an important point. I think one of the answers to the question, Philip, might be the case that the MPs' expenses scandal, which happened several years ago, really put MPs in a bad light. And most MPs, and I tried to do it a couple of times. Esther was much more successful, and you were much more successful than I was. But I still remember Esther speaking at that conference when she said, "What's a girl like me doing in a party like this?" I was in the room, Esther. Look, the point is, right, that MPs at the time, when the expenses scandal happened, it really led to a loss of trust in politicians. I think the Iraq war didn't help with that whole debacle as well. So I think there are deeper issues here. I think I totally accept, Philip, that it's wrong that it's always MPs that are singled out. And quite honestly, in my view, if I was running the thing, I'd make some new rules. I'd pay MPs more, I'd have fewer of them, and I'd make them do other jobs before they get into Parliament and make an age limit. You cannot go into Parliament below the age of 30, because what you're having now is you're having a number of MPs, and it's on the front page of the Eye here, Tory fear mass exodus of MPs before the election, including your GB News colleague, Dehenna Davison, who's only 29 and is already leaving Bishop Auckland. We've got Will Ragg, he's 34, he's leaving. You've got Chloe Smith, 40, she's leaving. And why are all these people leaving? I mean, it used to be the case that this was a vocation that you went into.
But because they think that is in the seat?
Absolutely. I mean, look,
Rishi Sunak is a good guy. He's not a miracle worker. He's trying to manage a party and manage decline at the moment, right? I said this with no relish at all. It's really sad. I mean, look, the Tory party had its flirtation and love affair over the summer with Liz Truss, which ended disastrously. And he's trying to pick up the pieces. It's a really difficult time. I do think people should stay and fight to the bitter end and leave with some dignity. I'm disappointed, but I think they're trying to find out a job.
I agree you fight on to the bitter end. I did in Merseyside. I knew I was going to lose. I was minus 30 points the year before and took it down to 0.8%, so it's a lot of hard work.
Absolutely.
And you should stick where you are.
So
but anyway, we've got to, get our views in from our viewers, so please tell us what you think at gbviews at gbnews.uk, because coming up, we'll be looking into why Conservative MPs are leaving at the moment. We'll be talking about that. And we'll also have Kevin and Ali at 11 o'clock as well. So don't go away. Stay with us.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It is a dry start out there for many of us, but more wet and windy weather will soon be on the way. However, it is the last bout of Atlantic weather before change arrives next week. For the time being, a brief ridge of high pressure has affected us during the last 24 hours, but weather fronts are knocking on the door. Those weather fronts are spilling in from the west. Ahead of them, some clear spells, some sunshine first thing for parts of central and eastern England. A chill in the air here, a few mist patches. Further west, it's been a mild start. We've got the wind and rain pushing into Northern Ireland, much as Scotland, Western England and Wales by the afternoon. That rain initially light and patchy, it turns heavier and more persistent later, driven in by gale force winds around coastal areas. However, those winds are coming from the south, so 12, 13, perhaps even 14 or 15 degrees is possible. In East Anglia in the southeast, it's a bright afternoon, but the cloud will be thickening and the rain arrives here during the evening. Likewise for northern Scotland, the rain on and off through the day, but the more persistent stuff arrives during the evening. Could cause some issues for central parts of Scotland because of the very soggy weather that we've seen recently. The rain lingering there through the night for East Anglia in the southeast, but elsewhere it does clear. And with clear spells arriving by dawn, well, it looks like there'll be some showers in the northwest, but otherwise a bright start for many on Sunday. I don't think it'll be a frosty start. There'll be too much cloud and enough of a breeze to prevent that. And we've still got those outbreaks of rain on and off for East Anglia in the southeast during Sunday morning, perhaps turning heavier and more persistent again into the afternoon. Brighter conditions elsewhere, still quite a few showers for parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, West Wales, but otherwise some high cloud and largely dry and bright weather. 12, 13 Celsius still possible and a less windy day, certainly. Now into the start of next week, there'll still be a few showers around, especially for western parts on Monday, but overall there is a trend towards drier weather.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 10:22. This is Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. Well, look, Rishi Sunak is under pressure from his party. But can you imagine having 3 former Prime Ministers sitting behind you in Parliament?
The Prime Minister has Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Theresa May to contend with over his policies and his direction for the country. But how much of a problem is it with them sitting on the backbenchers? Joining us now to discuss this and all the other big stories in the political world is journalist John Rentoul. John, thank you for joining us. We're in quite a unique situation, aren't we, with the Prime Minister having 3 of his predecessors sat there. And we've already seen, I think, Boris and Liz signing an amendment against the government policy on onshore wind. I mean, how big a problem is it for Rishi Sunak having these sort of big beast former Prime Ministers sat behind him?
It's a huge problem, and it's connected with the problem that you were talking about earlier about Tory MPs retiring at the next election. I mean, I think there are elements of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that have just given up already. There are other elements that are not reconciled to Rishi Sunak's leadership. There's a very colourful quotation in the Times this morning from a Boris Johnson supporter saying they intend to replace Rishi Sunak with Boris Johnson after the local elections. And in the meantime, they won't let Rishi Sunak get any of his legislation through. The Conservative Party seems to have decided in its various warring tribes that it really wants to lose the next election.
I mean, is the problem for the Prime Minister, is it the MPs or is it the voters? I mean, one of the things that strikes me, John, is that the public are very largely anti-establishment. And in many respects, that was part of Boris Johnson's appeal, that he was sort of seen as an anti-establishment figure, whereas Rishi, for all his qualities, is sort of seen more as an establishment figure. Probably Keir Starmer's seen more as an establishment figure. Is that one of the problems for politicians, that they're seen now too much as the establishment and they need to be more anti-establishment?
I don't agree with you, Phil. I think I think there is that anti-establishment sentiment, and there's an anti-politics sentiment, certainly. But as you say, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer are both managerial politicians. They're both trying to sell themselves on competence. And Rishi Sunak, I think, would have a good chance against Keir Starmer at the next election if his party would let him, and if his predecessors as Prime Minister would let him. I mean, Boris Johnson's an absolute disgrace. He was Prime Minister for 3 years. He maintained the ban on onshore wind. For him to sign an amendment, a disloyal rebel amendment on calling for wind turbines, I think is just the height of hypocrisy. And for that to happen after just 30 days of Rishi Sunak's premiership, I think shows that he's bent on undermining his successor.
And usually there is that loyalty that former Prime Ministers show to their successor, that they don't do that. But who knows, it might show him up in a worse light, actually, than Rishi when people like yourselves are spotting this. But I'm going to push Philip's point a little bit further. If it isn't about anti-establishment and establishment, when you see Starmer saying that his long-term friendship with Andrew Sullivan, the US-based Thatcherite writer, and he's trying to be all pally-pally with Rishi Sunak, as we saw at the Spectator Awards. Do you think the public don't like that because they see them as a club together rather than actually supporting their views?
Well, I think the British public is totally inconsistent on that, as on many things. I mean, if you ask people, should politicians cooperate with each other, talk to each other, work together in the national interest, they'll say yes. If you ask people, are they a cosy club people who stitch up deals and conspire as the elite against the masses. People will say yes to that as well. You can't have it both ways. I think Rishi Sunak's a good prime minister and a good politician, and I think his party ought to support him. And I think it's a crying shame that they don't.
And it does seem that Keir is trying to be a Tory now, doesn't it? I saw the CBI conference, what he's talking about, lower taxes for working people when we can afford it. Go on, John.
You sound like a Corbynite. He's not a Tory at all. I mean,
no, I'm glad you've said that, John. John, I'm glad you've said that, because I think he's trying to pretend to win over Tory voters that he's a Tory. So I'm made up that you've said he's not. He's a socialist.
Well, yes, but I mean, he's a centrist socialist, and good on him. I mean, I think what is marvellous is, I mean, we Blairites were totally flat on our backs when Liz Truss took over, because we thought that was a disaster for the country. Now we have two centrists competing for the next election, and they're both. I mean, they're not far apart on many issues, but I think that's good. I think that's in the national interest. I think you want to give people a choice between different varieties of centrism, and I think I think either Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak are good choices to be prime minister. I think Boris Johnson and Liz Truss are not.
I mean, do we know what Keir Starmer actually believes in, John? Because I mean, he stood for the Labour leadership on basically a Corbyn agenda, and basically promising. I think he had a 10-point plan, all of which was basically to protect the legacy of Jeremy Corbyn. Now he's kicked Jeremy Corbyn out of the Parliamentary Labour Party, and now he's sort of pretending that he believes in this sort of Blairite vision that you're so fond of. I mean, do we know which is the real Keir Starmer?
I think that's a fair question, and I think he owes us an explanation as to why he more of an explanation as to why he supported Jeremy Corbyn and was a member of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet. But I mean, I'm afraid that I think the bottom line, the real answer, is that he's an ambitious politician. He wanted to be prime minister. So he had to just grit his teeth and sit through that period. I think his positions now are more authentic than they were before. I think there are questions. You can ask legitimate questions about what he really believes, but I judge him on the positions he's taken. And at the moment, I think he's offering a reasonable, competent alternative to the Conservatives.
John Rentoul, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on and get your insight. Thank you very much indeed.
Absolutely. Now, the MP for Bishop Auckland, Deanna Davison, a former GB News presenter, announced last night she will not be standing for re-election in 2024 in a blow to the Conservative Party.
Her decision adds to the flurry of Tory MPs who have publicly announced their intentions to retire from Parliament. So what does this mean for Rishi Sunak? We're joined now by Jessica Harrington, a former Conservative MP herself, who retired prematurely in 2015. Jessica, it's great to see you there, and I should say congratulations on your marriage in the subsequent time since you've been in Parliament. Look, I mean, it's quite interesting to see all of these people standing down prematurely from Parliament. What you did the same thing. Why did you do it? How big a decision was that for you?
Oh, it's a huge decision to stand down, and I'm fairly sure that it's not a decision anyone would ever take lightly, because it's such a huge privilege to be elected, all the work that goes into that, your responsibility to your team, to your constituents, and so on. So there are a number of factors. For me, it's a combination of factors, and in particular, I love being an MP, but I love being a barrister as well, and I wanted to pursue my law career at that point. But what I think we need to achieve is a parliament of all the talents. And I just think that it's unrealistic to say that some people can join for 30 years, even if they have the luxury of being re-elected all through that time. And some people can maybe only offer 5 or 10 years of public service. And I think that's a healthy debate to have. And I think that would be a healthy position for the country. You know, I do think that you need a combination, because the benefit, of course, of having people who are in Parliament for a number of years, they bring that expertise. You think about a large company or organisation, you don't want a high turnover of staff. You need people that can see through campaigns, through legislation, understand Parliament, and really have that continuity. But at the same time, if we want to achieve the best possible people there, even if they can just do 1 or 2 terms, then I think that's something to be encouraged.
And Jessica, I remember at the time speaking to you, because I know it was a big decision for you when you were a barrister and you are now a barrister. I remember you saying, well, how do I work this into my life as well as a woman, you know, getting married or what have you? So there is lots of things that you do need to take on board. But I think this notion that maybe it is a gruelling job, and people do need to understand that maybe you are worn out after 5 years. Do you think the pressures of the job now will inevitably mean churn? I know it's taken its toll on William Ragg, for instance.
Well, I mean, it is sort of an exceptional circumstances, the role, and you've got the public element of the job as well as trying to get your day-to-day paperwork done and answer all your constituents' inquiries and so on. There is a balance there. I think the main challenge really is the lifestyle, because really, although there are a number of MPs, obviously their constituencies are near Westminster, most people are not. And I think that it has to be borne in mind that you have to essentially live in 2 places. You've got to make that work for your own circumstances, for those of your family, and so on. There's a number of considerations for people to take. And I suppose for some people, it may be that until they're elected, they're not really aware of how that will impact. But, you know, I do think that, say, you know, Chloe, for example, has been in Parliament now a number of years.
That's Chloe
and she's
Smith.
made it clear it's just the right time for her and her family and her situation. Her service has now been a number of years.
And Jess, equally, Chloe Smith as well was ill with breast cancer and overcame it, same as Tracy Crouch. I mean, it is a high-pressure environment. Now, other questions that were raised this morning as we were doing the paper review, do you think it's some people not wanting to lose if they've never lost before? Now, Philip will carry on, and he's got a tough seat. When I was in Merseyside, I was saying this, when I was Wirral West, I thought I was going to win in 2015. I thought, and it was a tough, going to lose, and it was a tough battle. I was minus 30 points behind. When it got to the day, in fact, I'd narrowed it to 0.8%, so it was a tiny gap. So you might lose, you might not lose, but do you think that's playing on the mind as well?
Well, I hope not, because, I mean, that is politics. And with an election 2 years away, so much can happen. I think that I think it has to be more a decision based on your own circumstances and what is right for you and your family. I mean, I think if we look at the last 2 years in politics, I wouldn't like to be the person to bet on what's going to happen in 2 years' time. So, but I mean, of course, Esther, we all know as well, former colleagues who don't know. They turn up on you know, it's election day, it's polling day. They turn up at the town hall, and they have no idea if they're going to still have a job at the end of the night. Then they leave the town hall or the leisure centre without a job. And actually, if they have responsibilities and so on, personal circumstances, that for them might be truly devastating in so many ways, let alone politically, and let alone in their responsibility for their team and their association and so on. So I do accept that, of course, people have to plan.
Jessica Harrington, thank you so much indeed for joining us today. Thank you for your time. So
great to see her thriving outside.
Do you know what?
And
everybody loved her in Parliament.
Exactly,
so it's a big loss to your colleagues in Parliament as well when somebody like Jess leaves. Anyway, coming up, have you wondered how your funeral will look and how your life will be celebrated? Loads of people do that. You know, will everybody be all nice about you, or will actually they say, thank God she's gone anyway? Well, after the break, we'll be speaking to a specialist who tell us all about it. So that's after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. Your views are here in front of us. Interesting what you're thinking about with MPs standing down in the next general election and who you've got a choice of prime ministers.
Yeah, Rich says, I'm not surprised MPs are leaping before they're pushed. The policies over the last couple of years are very unpopular and the government are blatantly pursuing policies that are contrary to the manifesto.
Wow. Alan, with so many standing down at the next election, does anyone really think the Tory party can recover by the next election? Big question there.
And George says, I think the next general election, if I bother to vote at all, will just be a choice between which form of betrayal seems easier to tolerate. Quite some strong views there.
There are strong views. You want them coming in because you know what? This is the place that you can have a fair say and air those
Absolutely,
views.
we like hearing your views.
So are you worried that your funeral won't properly reflect your life? I mean, should you be bothered? But are you worried? Well, join the club, the Coffin Club. The group describe themselves as funeral celebrants and offer people the chance to design their own final resting place.
Well, we're joined now by Kate Tim, a co-founder of the Coffin Club. Thank you so much for joining us, Kate. So come on, tell us about the Coffin Club. What is it and how did it start?
Well, so the Coffin Club is an educational platform where you come and plan your perfect send-off. It started because Kate and I, there's another Kate, there's two Kates, we work as funeral celebrants and when we started as funeral celebrants, we were somewhat underwhelmed, shall we say, by the state of funerals in the UK. They're fairly templated. There's quite a cookie cutter approach. It's, you know, church or other place of worship or crematorium. You've got 20 minutes, half an hour to sum up a whole life. And there's very little sort of personalisation. And we were a bit frustrated by that. So we had gone to lots of wedding venues because we were also wedding celebrants and talked to them about hosting funerals. And they were all very enthusiastic. And then when we went to our local funeral directors, they were less enthusiastic. So we decided that it would be our job to tell our community that they could celebrate their life in myriad different ways.
But in a way, it's usually a difficult conversation to have. Lots of people don't want to think about sort of their end and what happens. So when people come to you, what is the first conversation they have with you? How do you reach out and what are they trying to achieve and what have you helped them achieve?
Well, people usually come to Coffin Club for a few reasons. One might be that they are actually terminally ill, so there is, you know, a very pressing point to them coming to Coffin Club. But often it's because they have just done a funeral for a parent, maybe, or a sibling, and they have found the process, somewhat lacking. Or they realised that there was a lot they didn't know, that when they were being asked, what sort of music would the person like? What sort of coffin might they have liked? They don't know the answers, and they find that difficult, and they don't want to leave the people who are going to be organising their funeral in that position. So they decide to get it sorted, and then they just get on with living.
Kate, just quickly in the final moments, I know Miriam Margoyle is a patron, but can you tell us in the closing minutes, what are the fun things? What have people painted their coffins? What do they do with them? What are the conversations there?
Well, Miriam Margolyes, she just had a very simple coffin and she just put a Star of David on it, which was lovely. We had somebody who was a printer for newspapers, so he put like red top banners on his coffin, and he also put a "This Way Up" sign and a "Handle with care." We had someone who liked music, who put musical scores on her coffin. Someone who loved travelling, he had maps of places he'd been, and he had tickets from all the gigs that he'd been to because he was really into music. I mean, they're not always great works of art, but they really reflect the person's life. And not everyone who comes to Coffin Club decorates the coffin. The other Kate, when she dies, she wants to have a life-size Kevin Bacon on the inside of her coffin lid, so that he goes with her into eternity.
Kate, thank you so much for telling us about the Coffin Club. We'll have to start giving it some thought ourselves, I suspect, at some point in the near future, so thank you for that. I must say, I like a good funeral, to be perfectly honest. In fact, I prefer going to a funeral than to a wedding, if I'm perfectly frank. I think they can be quite uplifting about celebrating somebody's life.
Well, we went, didn't we,
having a laugh about people, I think whereas weddings go on forever and are boring, I think.
The wonderful Sir Christopher May, a friend of GB News, who used to come on the show here. We went to his the other week. It was magnificent, and who we had speaking there. But I think this was a bit fun. Dark humour, call it what you will, but I think it's great preparation. But look, now we're joined in the studio by friend of the show, Andrew Eborn, who's going to tell us about some of the biggest news, legal stories of the week.
Absolutely. Well, online safety bill making a return to Parliament to be debated in December. What they're looking at here is basically making sure that the criminal law is fit for the internet age. And we talked about upskirting beforehand. That became a criminal offence in 2019. They've realised there are a few loopholes now. So having done that, they're looking at down blousing and also deep fake porn. And this is where you can basically take somebody's head and you can do anything with it effectively, putting nude bodies and so on and so forth. The statistics on it are horrendous. Cyber flashing, for example, Professor Jessica Ringrose in 2020 said 76% of girls aged 12 to 18 had been sent unsolicited images by boys or men. And also the YouGov survey said about 4 in 10 of 18 to 34-year-old women were sent unsolicited sexual images. It's something that needs to be addressed, and it is being done.
That putting somebody's head, probably obviously a famous person's head, on something they've never done, never wanted to do, never been seen done. I mean, I guess it's about finances at the end. Somebody's earning money off the back of that by pretending they've got an X-rated movie of somebody.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, and it's both that, but also people do it to harass. So it's like revenge porn and so on and so forth. The key is to make sure that you deal with the mischief. The mischief is exactly that, and harassment and so on and so forth. The balance with the online safety bill is exactly that. It's between freedom of speech and people talking about legal but harmful and that whole sort of stuff and the debate about that sort of side. But also, I can tell you, the internet...
Be going now. Legal but harmful.
I think the government's going to scrap.
Yeah, exactly. That was the whole debate about that.
I'm glad it took them a couple of years. I said that from the word go. Just focus on the children.
Yeah.
Focus on the bits that you can do, and let's not get caught up in something that we can't control. But this is the most important.
Yeah, absolutely. So that will all be debated by your good selves over the next few weeks. But I think that's the key. But also bear in mind keeping up with technology, because now the way you can manipulate images, question everything is what I say. And as long as the law can keep up with technology, that's what we're trying to do and plug those sort of holes. The other thing which has happened, and also interesting, is Scotland, and I segue into it, Scotland was one of the first people in 2010 to outlaw or do a specific criminal offence about upskirting. But also, it hasn't been a good week for Nicola Sturgeon. As predicted, the Supreme Court unanimously decided that, no, you can't have a second referendum. It's not just an opinion poll. It would, in fact, be something which you can't do. And so she's been refused to have that sort of side. But she said she's going to make it a political choice at the next election, and they will say that will effectively be a de facto referendum. Now, I don't think every other party is going to turn around on that sort of basis and agree with that.
I mean, nobody expected the Supreme Court to come up with any other verdict.
No.
Why would you go to court over something that you know when you know you're going to lose? Because they also know
and everybody did, and we said on this show they're going to lose. It's crazy. And Lord Reid, who's a Scottish judge, he was the one who delivered the verdict anyway.
Absurd was his word.
It is absurd.
Well, is there no way somebody, if you know, the SNP have been litigious in a way with this, is there no way somebody could take a case against them for wasting the taxpayers' money on a case that you were not ever going to win?
I think it's crazy. The trouble is the whole raison d'etre of Nicola Sturgeon is to keep on banging on about independence and so on and so forth. And if you look at the statistics again, 51% of the UK voted in favour of leaving the EU, 62% of those in Scotland said they wanted to remain. But it was supposed to be, and this is why they try to use that as the argument, it's supposed to be a once-in-a-generation, basically, decision about Scotland and independence. And in, 2014, 55% of the Scottish people rejected it. So you've had your once-in-a-generation, you can't keep coming back and so on and so forth, which is interesting. But the other lighter note this week is Prince Andrew. We always like a story about Prince Andrew, don't we? It's now been turned into a musical, can you believe? And it's going to be on Channel 4 over Christmas. They're thick, crusty and hard to swallow. I reckon it'll be that sort of stuff.
Is it going to go on at the same time as the King's Speech?
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Head-to-head with the King. Andrew the musical or the King's Speech?
It's going to be... But they've got some wonderful lines in it. It's like, I nailed it, which is his deluded belief that the interview went well, that Newsnight interview. And Will You Be My Ex-Wife? He does a little duet with Sarah Ferguson. But what I love is that you'll always be Gareth, you're always going to need an Andrew. That's the sort of final thing. So Harry Enfield's involved, they've got Hat-Trick Productions involved. It should be a rip-roaring laugh over Christmas. But we've also got, talking about famous cases, you've got Wagatha Christie is now on at the West End. So we've talked about that on the show beforehand.
How have they got that on so fast?
Well, I reckon people have been working on this for a little while, and I think that's the key. You've got your theatre. Some theatres have been looking for shows. This is at the Wyndham Theatre.
I know somebody who's been to see it already. I think
what do they think?
They were amazed it happened so quickly.
Yeah.
And they saw... I won't say it. They saw in the audience the barristers, or one of the barristers who'd been there. He was obviously checking
the actual thing,
how accurate it was and how well he was being portrayed.
I just wondered whether or not the transcript of the court case has been used faithfully in this production, or whether they've just used artistic licence to make the...
They claim they've taken the 7 days of extraordinary testimony, and we analysed that on this very show, talking about Davy's locker and where's Davy's locker, where's he going to get it back, all those sort of glorious things. They're apparently all in.
So I think it will be a fairly true representation.
Well, your friends have seen it. What do they think of it?
Well, they enjoyed it. They were more impressed with who was in the audience, who was watching
that's a great idea.
They're taking their notes, but I said one of the barristers was in the audience. And go on, what other ones?
Well, also they've got the strange case. So this is movies are basically being made out of famous legal cases. There's a wonderful company down in Plymouth. We like to shine our spotlight on different areas within the UK. The Plymouth film company called Time Lock Productions. They've done the strange case, you'll know this from your legal days, the strange case of the snail in the bottle. And they're basically going through, and this is all to do with this wonderful case called Donoghue and Stevenson, which basically set up the whole principle.
Everybody who does a law degree gets taught that
they all get taught that as the foundation for negligence and duty of care. But what this particular company have done, all to their credit, they've taken lots of these famous legal cases and turned them into dramas. And they've also done the one, Carlisle and the Carbolic Smokeball Company, you remember about that sort of stuff. So every lawyer will be looking at this with a fantastic series.
But at the end of the day, everybody loves drama. What do we watch all the times, whether it's real-life crime, whether it is dramas go in the picture? This is what we love. I mean, they're turning it round rapidly to have the Colleen and Bardi case on, so they've turned around. But we love that, don't we?
It was, I don't know, for some reason, I was just thinking, I was watching, I don't know what it was either Blue Bloods or something last night. And there was a joke that
after the game that we all yawned through.
A police officer was saying that a turtle had been attacked by 3 snails, and the police investigator said to the turtle, "Can you tell us what happened?" And the turtle said, "No, I can't. It all happened so quickly."
I'm here all
On that note,
I don't know why I was just thinking of that, but it just made me think of that.
Andrew Eborn, as ever,
Pleasure to see you
very
both.
much indeed, and we'll be bringing you more
Aidan
lawful
McGee would have been
news.
proud of that, Joe.
He totally would.
Yeah.
He'll be using it. What
Yeah.
you're talking about? Well, anyway, last night England were sent a strong reminder. It might not be easy to bring it home. The 3 Lions put in a poor performance. That's what we're saying. Well, you were yawning, I was yawning against the USA. Eventually ending the match with a terrible 0-0 draw.
Meanwhile, earlier on in the day, Welsh hearts were broken as they conceded 2 late goals to Iran, all but effectively confirming their exit from the World Cup.
I was just looking at 3 of the front pages today called Yawn in the USA. They've all got the same headline. That was a yawn that they all had the same headlines.
Absolutely.
But let's cross over now to Doha, where our reporter, Paul Hawkins, is waiting for us. Paul, have you recovered? Did you all have to go and have a drink afterwards to recover from a terrible match?
Yeah, that would have been good. Possibly we're in the wrong place if you just want to easily get a cheap drink to try and get over that shocking performance, be you either English or Welsh. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Just to bring you up to date with what's happening right now in Doha, where it's currently 10 to 2 in the afternoon, getting very noisy. It's the big crowd here, the noise you can hear. Over there, you can see some Argentina fans, and over here are the Mexicans, because the big match today, it'd be big on any day, Argentina playing Mexico, but the fact that Argentina lost to Saudi Arabia in their first game means they could be knocked out today by Mexico if they lose. So Argentina have to win. Mexico want to knock Argentina out of the World Cup. This is what the Mexican fans have been telling us.
Very exciting to be here in our this is my first World Cup, and I say, David, I think it's the last of Messi, and it's kind of confusion because we are a huge fan of Messi, but also for Mexico, so it's very exciting.
Well, what would it mean for Mexico to knock Argentina out of the World Cup?
I think it's very hard. We have the hope.
Because you love Messi, but...
Yeah, but we're from Mexico, so we support both. El Chucky Lozano, El Chucky Lozano.
Yeah, so the Mexicans are up for it later. Let's just turn our attention to England and Wales then, starting with Wales, who have it all to do in the last game. They need to beat England and hope the results go their way to qualify for the next round. Following that terrible performance yesterday, Iran scoring 2 goals very late into the match, and Wales had their keeper, Wayne Hennessy, sent off. However, some Welsh fans feeling still optimistic, feeling confident, feeling defiant. This is what they've been telling us.
I think overwhelming feeling, disappointed, didn't perform like we could, so generally disappointed.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we are disappointed with the results, certainly in the Iran game. We were hoping to get a point out of that, at least to put us in a big position and keep destiny in our own hands for the next round of games. But we are still in the tournament going into the final round of games. We can still qualify, OK? We're delighted to still be in that conversation. So, you know, where there's a chance, there's still hope for us.
So, yeah, Wales fans are feeling confident. England, on the other hand, I mean, let's be honest, England were terrible. They were rubbish last night. The USA, by far the better team. It wasn't just a boring match to watch. It was quite, as an England fan, it felt quite anxious because the USA should have scored and would have deserved to win. Phil Foden, one of England's best players, kept on the bench. England, in the second half, they went 40 minutes without a shot on goal, and in the whole match, they only managed 8 shots in total. They haven't lost. They haven't scored that fewer number of shots since 1990, when they managed 6 shots against the Republic of Ireland. It was lethargic. It was tiring. It was slow. The decision making was very slow, and when they did make the decision, they inevitably picked the wrong one. So there's lots of work for Gareth Southgate's men to do, not necessarily to qualify for the next round, but to trouble any of the big teams in this competition, as England fans have been telling us.
USA are a good side. They're a young side, and 4 years' time they're going to be a force, especially if it's in the next World Cup's in the States. There'll be a team to look out for.
He started with the team that had played so well before, so I can't criticise him for his team choice. But as players who didn't turn up, didn't perform like we thought they were going to perform.
Who should he have brought on?
I think Foden was the one we were calling out for. I'm a Chelsea supporter, and the two guys that I would have replaced, I would have put Grealish and Foden on for Mount and Sterling. I didn't think they performed at all last night.
Wales simply have to win on Tuesday when they play England. England can still qualify for the next round, even if they lose 3-0 to Wales. 4-0, that's a different story, but they can afford to lose 3-0 to Wales and still qualify for the next round. Right now, Tunisia are losing 1-0 to Australia. It's currently half-time in that match. Later on, France take on Denmark, and then this evening, Argentina against Mexico is going to be worth a watch. That's good. The noise in the stadium is going to be incredible for that one.
Giving us that update. It's the sort of the morning after the night before, isn't it? And people, there's still no optimism, is there? Nobody's looking back and thinking, oh, maybe it wasn't that bad last night.
And Paul didn't pull his punches with the description nor the fans.
Paul's he's a harsh critic, isn't he? Absolutely.
But excellent reporter.
Exactly, absolutely top-class reporting. Anyway, coming up, we'll have the biggest stories from your Saturday papers, and we'll be asking whether or not the BBC's coverage of the World Cup has gone too woke. We'll be speaking with the chairman of the DCMS Select Committee about that, so stay with us.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
You're watching Esther and Philip on this Saturday morning. We've got a great hour lined up for you as we speak about COP27 and net zero with Lois Perry.
Now, that is going to be interesting because they're calling for a referendum on net zero. Should we be having net zero or not with the cost of it?
That will be interesting indeed. We've got the BBC coverage in Qatar with Julian Knight, the chairman of the DCMS Select Committee, and whether it's been too woke. And we're also talking robots with Will Guyot about whether or not robots, apparently now, are more duplicitous than human beings. Do you believe that?
I certainly do. And also we've got here Kevin Woodford and Ali Mirage will be looking through the papers with us, so don't go anywhere, because first it's the news with Tatiana.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 11. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The London Fire Brigade's commissioner has accepted the organisation is institutionally racist and misogynistic. Andy Rowe told the BBC he was heartbroken and has vowed change following an independent review into the LFB's culture. The report revealed accounts from a black firefighter who had a noose placed by his locker, women being groped and people having their helmets filled with urine. The review was commissioned after a trainee firefighter took his own life in 2020. London Fire Brigade bosses have said the behaviour is not acceptable and welcomed the recommendations made by the review. Train cleaners have voted to strike over pay in what would be the biggest strike ever in the industry. The rail, maritime and transport unions say more than 1,000 of its members working for several private contractors backed the industrial action. It says rail strikes by train drivers continue today with more travel disruption expected. Members of ASLEF across 11 train operators will walk out in a dispute over pay, meaning a significantly reduced service. The death of a man at the Manston Migrant Processing Centre may have been caused by a bacterial infection. That's according to the Home Office. An investigation is currently ongoing and the coroner hasn't made a final conclusion on the cause of his death. It's believed the man arrived in the UK on a small boat just a week before he died. The government say they're offering vaccinations for the infection at the Manston Centre. Over 250 social housing tenants are meeting today for the launch of an official resident-led panel to improve unsafe conditions. The Housing Secretary wants to end tenants being denied a proper voice. Michael Gove is aiming to crack down on unsafe social housing conditions following the death of 2-year-old Awab Ishaq, who died from a respiratory condition linked to prolonged exposure to mould. British military intelligence says Russia is removing nuclear warheads from old cruise missiles before using them for attacks in Ukraine. The MOD says the move highlights Moscow's low stock of long-range missiles. It's after Ukraine's President Zelensky says 6 million people are still without power after a series of rocket attacks earlier this week. England manager Gareth Southgate has played down boos by disappointed fans following the Lions' draw with the USA in the World Cup last night. And with that, England missed out on a chance to guarantee a place in the last 16. Supporters at a fan zone in South London were furious by the result, throwing cups and spraying drinks. England, though, can still make it to the knockout stages, but this match has piled on the pressure heading into Tuesday's clash with Wales. Former English football manager Sam Allardyce says England could still win the tournament.
There's enough experience in the backroom staff, the manager, there's enough experience in the squad now, having gone through 2 tournaments, that they've got the tools to win this competition. But Gareth needs to use the squad to its full potential, and that means, for me, quite a few changes for the next game.
Meanwhile, former US international Eric Wijnaldum told us he's looking forward to that upcoming clash between Wales and England.
This is an England side that is very capable of exploding. We saw that in the first game. Maybe they took their foot off the gas against us today, but that game against Wales is something that we won't miss. I'm going to be watching 2 televisions. The games happen at the same time. But that game is just as interesting and fascinating as our game against Iran. A lot of political implications there, let's say.
The Met Office has issued yellow weather warnings for rain and strong winds for large parts of the UK this weekend. Conditions will affect southern England, Wales and Scotland. The warnings in Wales and England will come into force at 2 p.m. and will stay in place until 3 a.m. tomorrow morning. Forecasters say there's going to be travel disruption as a result. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Tatiana. Now, we had an interview a little bit earlier with Kate Tim, who's one of the co-founders of the Coffin Club. Well, that got you all going. It was how to have a wonderful end to your life and who should decide it and how it should be done. Well, Karen says, I've always said I would like a lovely glitter coffin. There are a few out there, beautiful colours. And Carol said, I can't believe it. Life is for living and funerals are for the mourners to decide, not the dead.
It's a controversial view, isn't it? This is one for you, Esther, from Katie. Katie says, sadly, my mother died earlier this year and left us instructions that she did not want a coffin or an elaborate funeral. However, as she was, in my opinion, Liverpool FC's biggest fan, I knew she would approve of...
competition for that, though.
From your dad, largely. I knew she would approve of anything devoted to her beloved team. Therefore, I put coloured pencil to paper and designed for her a very tasteful red box decorated with the liver bird and the very appropriate "You'll never walk alone" text. I then found a company who could create it for me. So there you go. Katie was ahead of the curve, wasn't she?
Wonderful, but it's got us all talking about what would you want to do, how would you want to be celebrated. So thanks for your views on that. Now, we're rejoined by TV presenter and celebrity chef Kevin Woodford and columnist at the article Ali Mirage to look at what's caught their eyes in the paper today.
And I've got a couple of belters.
You've got... Well, it's all...
We know there's going to be trouble when we hear those words.
We always want a little
We're in trouble.
So the news is too miserable, to say the least. Ali, should we start with you this time?
Yeah, so I picked up this story that's been in the press. This one's in the Times, basically. Women firefighters abused and bullied in London fire brigade. It's not just women, by the way. It's also one Muslim officer as well. I mean, a female officer had her helmet filled with urine. A Muslim officer went on a Hajj pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia, came back, and they said they put a sticker on his locker saying, hope you enjoyed your Al-Qaeda training. I mean, look, this kind of stuff is absolutely outrageous. It's wrong. We've seen what's happened in the police force with officers taking pictures of dead victims and passing them around on WhatsApp. What on earth is going on in parts of the public sector here? It's absolutely disgraceful. And the sad thing about this is that I'm sure that most firefighters are putting themselves in harm's way day to day, going into burning buildings, trying to keep us safe, as are the police, although, frankly, some of the police tactics are completely useless, and I think there's a breakdown of trust now and some elements of the police actually just doing their job properly. But I would like to think that most people are trying to go about their business and trying to help us. And then you've got these bad apples, rotten apples, who, frankly, should be fired, right? They should be fired. And, I mean, this is the head of the fire brigade, Andy Rowe, who is the one who opened this investigation. If nothing changes, if culture doesn't change, it has to go from the top.
What I don't understand, Ali, is that, you know, I can't reconcile this kind of behaviour going on in the public sector with all this thing where if somebody doesn't use the right pronoun on somebody, you know, they get castigated and disciplined because you didn't call them him and he.
So you're saying, are people being distracted?
Yes, we seem to be focusing on all sorts of stuff that's completely trivial and not on stuff that might be much more important.
Well, exactly. Look, I mean, the pronoun thing, I mean, look, to be honest with you, on the pronouns issue, I do find it slightly strange that we're going down this road. However, if we're moving to a society, right, where you can't make these assumptions, maybe pronouns help. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people are using them on LinkedIn now, right? And maybe that's the world we're moving to. I mean, I find it all a bit difficult to navigate, personally. Maybe that's my problem.
But you see, I'm more on, look, we're all going on a journey together, we're all learning.
Yeah.
And you know what? If I make a mistake and call you something by mistake, then I apologise. But what I meant is it shouldn't be a sackable offence.
Of course
it probably wasn't meant with malice. And I think what Philip's saying there is you've lost sight of the really big, intrinsic, you know, issues here. And people seem petrified to get a name wrong. And I'll tell you why. Maybe it's easier to figure out you've done that wrong, because you say immediately this takes a little bit more investigation, it takes a little bit more rooting out, and it's a much more difficult to deal with. So you're dealing with the easy and not the difficult.
But can you imagine, Esther, Philip, Kevin, any kind of workplace where this kind of behaviour would be acceptable. I mean, honestly, there's HR departments. If I did this on my hood, I'd be fired in 5 minutes.
I'm going to move. I was going to do another one on how to solve the problem, because it fits in with here, how to solve the problem, because I was looking at the immigration figures this week, the net immigration figures, which were at a record high, and they're saying a lot of those were down to 476,000, down to visas issued to overseas students. So what are you going to do with that? Should we reduce the numbers coming in? And also, it was the dependence as well of those students coming in as well. So you've had kickback, who by the university and also Joe Johnson, brother of Boris Johnson, say, no, you shouldn't cut those numbers. In fact, predictions were to grow to 600,000 by 2023. And then you've got the person who's the director of global partnerships at Sheffield Hallam University saying, no, we don't want to reduce those numbers. They've all got vested interests. That's his job. And then that was in the FT and then in the Times. So how do we solve the problem? Do we do it the difficult way and stop all these people coming in? Also get to understand universities, they shouldn't be so dependent on these students for money. Or do you do what the USA does and just remove foreign students from immigration figures? Now, if that's the way you solve the problem, the easy way...
That's the political way of solving
exactly,
the problem.
just take them out of the numbers and not deal with it. And I'm afraid I see too much of that going on, which sort of relates to what you were saying.
But there is a fiscal element to all of this. I mean, I go back to my days when I was, the head of a college of FE in England. We were bringing in, because we were told to, we were bringing in Libyan students into the departments. We're bringing them over from Libya, purely because there was a fiscal, benefit to that. And was there a reason for these particular guys being there? Not really. It was purely physical. And so I beg your pardon, it was purely fiscal. That's all it was.
That's right.
Purely,
too big.
But it's got worse and worse than that. It was minimal in my day.
Scheme.
Now, absolutely, it's a pyramid scheme. You're absolutely right. And so a student coming in now from abroad can bring 5 relatives with them as well. It needs to be addressed. It really does. Honestly, it does.
Bill?
Well, I'm going to... I've got a couple of belters here. I like to have lighter stories, Ali. That's my thing. So 2 stories caught
Take some hours rummaging through the paper for this drivel.
Page 9 of the Daily Mail. If you're listening on radio, I apologise, because you really need the pictures, really, which is... the headline is, Would You Adam and Eve It? Cracking headline. I love it. Highlighting a good headline. It's there for page 9 of the Daily Mail. You need to see the picture.
Binoculars on that one.
We probably don't want binoculars on it, to be fair. It's basically about people who organised a dinner for a naturist, organised a dinner at a local pub. And it was going to go ahead. The pub were all for it. And they got an objection to it on the grounds of road safety fears. And what they feared was that everybody driving... Apparently, this pub's got big windows.
Yeah, of course.
If anybody's been there, it's in East Sussex, and it's the Swan Inn in Kent. The Swan Inn in Kent, and basically they feared that as everyone was driving past in the car, they'd be looking in, and it would cause accidents. And I just wondered, Kevin, when you drive past a pub, do you happen to look across at the pub to see if there's anyone naked in the window?
I will be in future, but let me just point something out with regards to that. You do need... It's a shame that you haven't got that particular newspaper in front of you, and pity we can't get a proper shot. There's one particular... There's 2 photographs. One of a collective of nudists, and the other one is one individual, and he's hiding his benefits, is probably the best description of it, with a huge plant pot this big, right? Yeah. Now, I wouldn't need one that big.
Well,
but also, this nudist thing, it's I don't understand.
It's a growing phenomenon.
That's a good
Is it really? Is it? We had neighbours, when I lived in Lincolnshire years ago, we had neighbours that were nudists, and we were invited, my wife and I were invited to an open day in Crowell, which is not far from Scunthorpe, in the winter, to a nudist camp, just to see whether we'd be interested. The idea of being naked in Crowell in December, it wouldn't work for me in this life.
Well, as one of the former members said to a new member, he said, are you new? He said, why? Does it stick out a mile?
It's like a carry-on film here. Now, somebody who would need a large plant pot to cover up their stuff...
You've another one.
Page 25 of The Sun today. The headline is Unexpected Item in the Package Area, where a dad claims he was accused of shoplifting when a store worker mistook a bulge in his trousers for a tube of Pringles that he was hiding to try and steal from the shop. This apparently happened in an Asda store. I used to work for Asda. I can't remember this ever happening, to be perfectly honest. And basically, he said that it was a cock-up.
Please, Philip.
But anyway, I should point out that, as to say that no colleagues at the store were aware of this incident.
Or harmed
he reckons
during
he dropped his trousers to prove that he wasn't hiding a packet of Pringles in there. But I suspect it's probably the proudest moment of his life that he was accused of hiding
Kevin,
a packet of Pringles.
can you make it slightly more highbrow? Can you take up the calibre of this newspaper review? Ali is shocked here. Wondered what show he's come on.
Let's just lift the whole thing, right? Because we need to, and get back to some sensible discussion here, Phil. As interesting as it was, all to do with your members and everything. This is the time I just completed my tax returns, and it's that time of the year. It's a serious business as this. And this is a story that goes back a little bit, right? So I apologise for the delayed response. It's probably a year old, but it's one that I think is worth pointing out. This particular guy in Evesham, he made his tax return. And one of the questions that he was asked, as you are, was, do you have anyone dependent on you? And his answer was as follows. 2.1 million illegal immigrants, 1.1 million crackheads, 4.4 million unemployable Jeremy Kyle scroungers, 900,000 criminals in over 85 prisons. I apologise for the next bit. Plus 650 idiots in Parliament, right? So apparently HMRC responded by saying, no, you can't do this. This is totally unacceptable. And the man's response was, well, who did I miss out? I love it.
Nobody, I think, by the sounds. I think he was thorough in that response.
Reminds me of Ken Dodd.
Well, we've got a tiny story, if you can, Ali.
But just following on from Kevin, I mean, there's a double-page spread in the Mail from Andrew Neil saying, from eco-protesters and migration to NHS waiting list strikes, a housing crisis. Britain is paralysed by toxic brute of political incompetence and impotence. No wonder millions are now asking, why can't this government get anything done? Perhaps Philip and Esther can answer this. But look, he's making a serious point here. Eco-loons blocking motorways. Immigration figures you've already talked about, completely out of control. Esther, we said we would control immigration post-Brexit. We haven't. 7 million on the waiting list. To be fair, we did have COVID. You can't blame the government for everything. But also, he's saying ministers are out of their depth. I do feel that there's been a dumbing down of the quality of some of these people up there.
There's a couple of them, and the reason I'll question it, I think there is a paralysis through political correctness and fear of getting anything wrong. There is scrutiny like never before, and if you say anything, you are piled in and on. I will also say never before has there been so many laws. So when you've got a law, you've got to check, does it conflict, does it do anything with any other? And it stops you doing something. So at the moment, brand new law Theresa May brought in about modern slavery, and that means now that we can't send any sort of illegal immigrants back home because of that. So I think there's too many conflicting and contrasting laws, and there is a fear of doing the wrong thing because you could either be bullying people, you can either be getting it wrong, non-politically correct.
I think Ali's onto something, though, because I do think the calibre of politicians is getting worse. I genuinely do.
Why is that, Philip?
Well, I think it's because, I mean, if you're successful and accomplished, why would you want to go into politics?
Because you get trashed.
All you get is abuse, you get social media.
That's why
it's made it worse.
This is why MPs are leaving now. They can't cope.
I think this is a worldwide problem, by the way. I don't think this is something confined to the UK. I think this is a worldwide problem of successful people in not wanting to go into politics.
I tell you, we will see you back on soon. Ali, Kevin, definitely we'll be back on soon, because coming up we'll be looking back at COP27 and asking if it's still viable for the government to be pursuing a net zero agenda during a cost of living crisis. Should we have a referendum on net zero? Stay with us.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236 and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app, and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. This is Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil, and it's 11:23.
We've had some views coming in about the MP standing down ahead of the next general election. Ian said, I don't think the Conservatives will win the next election, hence so many are standing down. They probably realise they could earn a lot more outside of politics. Keith says it comes as no surprise at all that some MPs are jumping before they are pushed.
Not a good image, that one. Norman, I believe the main reason MPs are standing down is due to Britain's too relaxed policy on immigration. So that's what he's saying there. So, as the nation buckles under the pressure of rising energy prices, campaigners like Lois Perry argue that the government's commitment to pursuing net zero is no longer viable.
According to YouGov polling, 62% of Brits now want a referendum on the climate target, up from 58% the previous year. The director of CAR 26, Lois Perry, joins us now. Lois, thank you very much for joining us. I mean, I don't think it's any great secret that I'm sort of with you on the issue of net zero, which I think is utterly futile. I was one of the 5 MPs who voted against the Climate Change Act back in 2008, so I think my views are long-standing. I'm more interested in this idea of a referendum, though, because I don't quite understand what's the question that you would ask in a referendum.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me properly. It's a terrible line, so I'll just say what I think you said. Basically, we asked the question whether people would consider having
The line there isn't too
It's
good.
not good, is
but
it?
I think you raise a good point there about referendums, and particularly after the Brexit referendum, that question, how it works, what's the percentage vote, who do you take on board, is key. And then the other thing, Phil, you alluded to it, how many MPs would be helpful in getting that referendum vote through if pretty much 642 voted against it are. Now, I don't know if we've got Lois there back, but it is a pretty bad line.
No,
I just heard it.
I mean, the thing is, I understand why people say there should be a referendum, because it's one of those issues like Brexit, whereby all the politicians, or virtually all the politicians, have one opinion and the public have a completely different opinion. So you can't rely on Parliament to deliver what the public want on this particular issue. It's exactly the same as we had with Brexit, where the public, as usual, were miles ahead of politicians on the issue. So I get why people say there should be a referendum, because it's similar in that sense.
Yeah, they're not listening to us. We want to
exactly. So how do the public have to say?
We want about what they've seen after the Brexit referendum. It isn't that easy. If you've got a Parliament and the MPs hell-bent, most of them, against that decision of the referendum, how do they then get it through Parliament as well? Or are you going to have a couple of years
Well, I think
arguing?
the problem is that what I don't understand is how a referendum on this would work. Because, first of all, what's the question that you would ask?
Yeah.
I mean, if the question is, people might say, well, the question is, should the government pursue a policy of net zero? OK? So people vote no, they shouldn't pursue. Yeah. What policies flow from that? Would that mean that the government could not pass any law that would reduce carbon emissions?
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't see how you actually...
Again, everybody thinks it's a really simple solution. We'll just say don't do it at all. But you're quite right. All of the legislation that is in place that's already got targets, does that continue or not? As you say, what flows for support for new businesses, what supports for stuff for sort of, I don't know, insulation. You would bring the country to a standstill and Parliament to a standstill. Referendums are not a simple answer. That's what we're saying, isn't it?
Well, it's just, I think on this particular... Sometimes there's an obvious one, like Brexit was an obvious referendum where there was an obvious solution. I'm not entirely sure that a referendum is a practical... Even though I agree with the sentiment, I'm not sure a referendum works in the same way.
And that's why it's handy having us on the air sometimes to explain this might be your view, but actually how does it work with 650 MPs in Parliament and law and government?
Well, we want to know your views.
Exactly.
You let us know
right.
what you think. You know, do you think there should be a referendum on net zero? What would the question be? How would it work if people voted against net zero in terms of policies? So let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We love hearing what you think.
But coming up, has the BBC been focusing too much on social issues instead of the football during the World Cup coverage? And they didn't show, did they? They didn't show the opening.
Exactly, the opening ceremony.
They didn't show that, or it was, but on the red button. Anyway, we'll be finding out after this short break. But first, let's get the news headlines with Tatiana.
Thank you. It's 11:28. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. I'm going to start with some breaking news, and at least 8 people have died and 13 are missing after a landslide in Italy. The incident happened on the holiday island Ischia, which has been hit by heavy rain in recent days. Emergency services say they're continuing the search and rescue operation as buildings have been engulfed by the landslide. We'll bring you more on this as we get it. The London Fire Brigade's commissioner has accepted the organisation is institutionally racist and misogynistic. Andy Rowe told the BBC he was heartbroken and has vowed change following an independent review into the company's culture. The report revealed accounts from a black firefighter who had a noose placed by his locker, women being groped and people having their helmets filled with urine. The review was commissioned after a trainee firefighter took his own life in 2020. Rail strikes by train drivers continue today, with more travel disruption expected for passengers. Members of ASLEF across 11 train operators will walk out in a dispute over pay, meaning a significantly reduced service. The General Secretary of ASLEF is due to meet the Transport Secretary Mark Harper next week to discuss the dispute. England manager Gareth Southgate played down boos by disappointed fans following the Lions' draw with USA in the World Cup last night. It means the team missed out on a chance to guarantee a place in the last 16. Supporters at a fan zone in South London were furious by the result, throwing cups and spraying drinks. England will face Wales next, with the latter needing a victory to keep up their chances of making the knockout round. And the Met Office has issued yellow weather warnings for rain and strong winds for large parts of the UK this weekend. Conditions will affect southern England, Wales and Scotland. The warnings in Wales and England will come into force at 2 p.m. and they stay in place until 3 a.m. tomorrow. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I love that, Mark, there. We're absolutely everywhere, to be fair. I do love GB News on radio. I'm afraid I have the radio on by the bed and everything, but never mind.
All your secrets are coming out now.
Now, the BBC and ITV have been broadcasting from Qatar non-stop for nearly a week as the World Cup continues to draw eyes from across the world.
But has the coverage been too focused on social, political and rights issues rather than the football? During the opening ceremony, the BBC relegated it to the red button option and instead began the tournament covering the controversies in Qatar.
And we've known a lot of people have been very upset by that, haven't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But is this a fair reflection of what licence payers want from their broadcaster? Joining us now is the chairman of the Department of Culture and Media Sport Select Committee, Julian Knight. So people are upset that they feel it's just too political and they just want the football.
Yeah, I mean, it's boring is the problem with it, and they're being lectured to, aren't they? I mean, the one that got my go, and I think got some of my constituents go, was the other day when they broke up the half-time coverage to talk about the environment and climate change, etc. Obviously a very serious issue, but I watched the news for that. I don't watch the football. And it was a very strange 3-minute section that was presented with all these sort of facts, supposed facts, where they said things like, we think you notice the word we think, that's good journalism, isn't it? We think that there are 10 million whatever qubits for in terms of emissions for the World Cup instead of the 3.5 million claimed by FIFA. It was a very strange sort of one-sided, entirely sort of out of kilter, and really, frankly, I think people just want the BBC to get on with showing the football rather than, frankly, giving them a lecture.
And the other thing is, of course, it's the football pundits who are doing this political lecture.
Oh, yeah.
And Gary Lineker's always said that he shouldn't be subject to the BBC's impartiality rules on Twitter because he's a sports presenter and a sports commentator, not a political journalist. So does this mean now that Gary Lineker will finally be subject to the same impartiality rules as every other BBC journalist, given that he's now openly ventured into the world of politics?
I don't think so. I think basically Gary Lineker writes his own rules. And, you know, when the chair of the BBC, the Director General of the BBC said that he needed to pull his horns in, he just made fun of him, frankly. I mean, I do wonder about this. I mean, the thing is with Gary Lineker, I mean, they go on about the environment and Gary Lineker. Well, how much carbon offsetting is sort of done by the BBC for all the hot air emitting from Gary Lineker on political issues? You know, he loves to venture off on all sorts of areas, often in a very, well, from my perspective, a very ill-informed, woke viewpoint, when actually the truth of the matter is that he's paid to present football matches, and maybe perhaps he and some of his other colleagues will just stick to it.
Why do you think they didn't show the opening ceremony of the Football World Cup, Julian? I mean, and instead decided to do this sort of political pontificating. I mean, what I don't understand is even if they'd wanted to do the political pontificating, they could have come on air half an hour before the opening ceremony started and done that, and still shown the opening ceremony. I don't understand why they didn't show the opening.
And it's not just you that we've been asked that by our viewers, we've been asked that by football fans. And this is part of the celebration. They put, you know, millions, in fact, billions of pounds into this.
I mean, they got the contract. Shouldn't they be showing the opening ceremony, what the people might want to see?
Well, I suppose so. I mean, I do. I mean, you know, I could have a slightly jaundiced viewpoint with the opening ceremony. The only decent one was the one that we did before the Olympics in 2012. I mean, they're normally mind-numbingly dull, but yeah, I suppose that is the case, that instead of doing the opening ceremony, they decided to do a half-hour, you know, sort of political, every sort of trot around. Well, you know, if they've got such a worry about the environment, then how many emissions were used by BBC presenters and reporters getting out to Qatar? I presume they didn't walk. So what are they doing about it? How are they actually sort of doing their bit, so to speak, rather, frankly, than wagging their finger at the rest of us?
I think what lots of people question as well is the sort of double standards here, that they're sticking the boot into Qatar over, you know, issues like LGBT and things like that. But nobody can recall them doing it when Russia hosted the World Cup 4 years previously, and they just, I think, invaded Crimea at the time. And obviously they don't have a great record on LGBT issues
And how
either.
about China with the Olympics?
We've got China with the Olympics. We've also got the next World Cup in America, where obviously there's a controversy over abortion and they have the death penalty. I mean, are we going to now have this at every single World Cup, that the BBC are going to highlight all the things that they don't happen to like politically in that country? Or is Qatar a special case?
Well, it's a bit of a sort of, dare I say, open goal for them, isn't it, to a degree? I mean, you know, Qatar's certainly not the worst of the countries in that particular part of the world when it comes to these issues, although, you know, obviously they do have a lot to be thoughtful about in these areas. But I think that frankly, I think the thing for me, just as, frankly, a football fan and, you know, someone who wants to actually watch sport and pays their licence fee, is the fact that I actually want to see that rather than frankly, an episode of Panorama. And there's an important point here, is the way in which the BBC tends to drift off. And it's such a big organisation with so many different parts to it that there doesn't seem a monitoring of actual output generally. So you end up with these sort of like flights of fancy that go on from different departments, and they sort of meet around their water coolers with their copies of The Guardian and sort of decide that, oh, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. And there doesn't seem to be, hang on a minute, this is actually for news journalists. This is for people who are expert in the area maybe to look at, rather than, frankly, someone who's come in 5 minutes before and really perhaps doesn't understand the issues in the round. And I think that's a real issue with the BBC, that almost they're too big. and they try and do too much. And you end up with this sort of collective wokeness that goes on throughout, running through its coverage.
Just very quickly, can you say, will your committee be having the BBC in front of you to ask them about their World Cup coverage? Is this something that you will be pressing them about?
Well, we actually have him in front of us very shortly about local radio. It's quite interesting because a couple of weeks ago they said they were actually going to cut back on their World Cup coverage. Well, I hardly see, frankly, it being held together with sticky back plastic and bits of wire everywhere. It hardly looks like they haven't been spending money on it. And, you know, where they're destroying local radio in this country and depriving a lot of people from a real connection with their communities and community news, they seem to be obsessed with doing these sort of you know, flights of fancy, as I say, in different parts of the BBC.
But Julian, just
when they come in
pushing
front of us, they will be questioned as to why it is that they want to cut local radio while they do this sort of stuff.
Julian Knight, Chairman of the DCMS Select Committee, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. We really appreciate it, Julian. Thank you.
I want to read out some of the views that have been sent into us. We've got from Phil here. We should have a referendum over something as important as net zero. We won't get one, of course, because we've demonstrated in the Indy ref and Brexit referendums that we have a mind of our own. And the politicians don't want that. They just want to now indoctrinate the next generation. Therefore, they'll get their way.
And Ken says, we did not vote for the Tories on a green agenda, which seems to take precedence over Brexit and border control.
Stuart says, hi, Esther, why, if you were a successful business person, would you go into politics? Big question mark.
And John says, thank you, Esther and Philip and their guests for a great programme this morning. Informative with great subjects and always great fun. But love the tax return submission that Kevin Woodford was talking about in the paper review. Absolutely brilliant.
Who were your dependents? And then he listed a whole range of people who were dependent on him, so that's why he paid his tax. But look, we're all now, we all know that computers can beat us at chess. He can beat me at chess. But now it turns out artificial intelligence can also beat humans at lying and backstabbing.
Even politicians.
I don't know.
I think beat politicians. I mean, my God,
they'd run a tight race with a politician.
I'm going to say, I think we could give them a run for their money in our profession. Experts at Meta, the parent company behind Facebook, have taught robots to win at the classic board game Diplomacy, where success is determined by negotiation and dishonesty. We're joined by tech expert Will Guyot to tell us more. Will, this is, I don't know whether this is to be impressed or scared by this. I suppose if you were going to be cruel, you might say that it was no surprise that Meta have come up with this, given that Nick Clegg works there and they probably had somebody good to base their skill set from. Well, how has all this come about?
Ouch, Philip David.
Listen, it's not unusual for you both to steal my best line, but I totally believe that giving this to politicians to check is going to be the ultimate test for this. Now, we've had computers through artificial intelligence that can beat humans at chess since 1995. That's when we had this whole thing with Kasparov and Deep Blue, and it was the idea of the human being versus the computer. And ever since that point, we've kind of been working on this stuff incrementally. Back in 2015, the computer started via a Google experiment, started beating people at the Chinese game Go, which is a bit like chess but has a bit more sophistication, and you have to think sort of multiple moves forward in order to be successful. But the computer started beating the Go Grandmaster. But now we've got to this stage where computers can now beat people in games that require human language. So they've got to, you know, the game is called Diplomacy. You're negotiating with people in this game. You are negotiating with them, trying to build trust. That's the idea of this game. And they've got into a position now where essentially you can win the game Diplomacy by lying, backstabbing and cheating. And they've essentially taught a computer to do that, an artificial intelligence to do that. Now, some would say that's brilliant because you're getting it closer to human behavior. But there's also the other side of this, if you're really deeply concerned. The idea of teaching a computer to lie probably isn't the best place to start, because you get into that situation whereby stuff like the film Terminator, for example, where the computers decide they don't want to turn themselves off, or 2001 A Space Odyssey. They don't want to follow the human instructions anymore because they can see that the mission is more important than what the humans are saying. Now, that might sound a little bit kind of space agey and a bit out of worldy to be discussing before noon on a Saturday, but that's ultimately what you're teaching this technology to do. You've taught a robot to lie.
Yeah, Will, I am with you. I mean, there'd be certain things I think it would be great. My talking scales, if it said a few pounds lighter, don't have a problem with that whatsoever. And obviously, I'd make sure it gave a few pounds heavier for Philip, and that would make me really laugh.
You don't need to.
But when you're talking that it is negotiating, it is having secrets, it's forming alliances with people, it's making pacts, bonds and breaking it. And then the next thing, it is also being taught betrayal. This is seriously scary stuff, at least I think so, because you have to then say, well, who is in charge? When people are talking about World sort of Health Organization, when people are talking about the Economic Forum, who is going to be in charge of morality?
That's a very interesting point, because currently nobody is, and that's the challenge. You know, governments have got interest in what tech companies are doing, but currently nobody is overseeing and controlling this. It's not like all of this artificial intelligence is being run by universities, so there's a way of having professional oversight over it. Just a few months ago, an artificial intelligence chatbot from Google was suggested to have the sentience and intelligence, to be sentient and have the intelligence of an 8-year-old. Now, it's slightly suspicious because we think the researcher involved had possibly been spending too much time with a computer and had maybe sort of lost their marbles slightly. But this is the suggestion of the secretive nature behind all of this stuff, and it is developing so quickly. Most of your viewers today will be like, no, Will Guyatt, this can't possibly be happening. Robots aren't more intelligent than humans. But we are getting to a tipping point where this technology exists, and if we don't do it properly, and if we don't manage it, and we don't use follow ethics and follow rules, you could soon find yourself in a situation where these systems simply don't want to be turned off.
Will Guyatt, thank you very much indeed. We're going to turn you off right now to prove that we're in control of this remote control. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I thought that was a very interesting topic. It might just be me.
It could be scary, though, isn't it, really? Anyway, as ever, to close out the show, we have our resident sports broadcaster, Aidan McGee, and our showbiz reporter, Hayley Palmer. Welcome both. We've got to start with sorry, Hayley, but we've got to start with the football.
On this occasion, I'll let you on.
Let me get my soapbox out, right?
Go on.
Last night, absolutely dreadful, right? Gareth Southgate.
I've had to live with this all night, last night. No.
Do you need me at this point?
Yes, like matrimonial
I want you to respond.
Relate.
He's got no idea what he's doing. We've got Pep Guardiola gets rid of Sterling to keep Phil Foden, but no, Gareth Southgate knows better. I'm going to play Sterling and not put Foden on, who, in my opinion, is the best English footballer in the country. He's no idea what he's doing, has he, Gareth Southgate?
I wouldn't say he doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, he has delivered a final and a semi-final in the last few years.
With the best group of players the country's probably ever had on a home tournament, which we should have won.
Yeah, possibly. All right, calm down.
Hang on, that's not a digging about me, was it?
No, certainly not. No, not at all. Look, it's judged over a period of a tournament, right? So USA are a decent team. Don't be one of those newcomers to football, those Johnny-come-latelys. I know you're floating in and out of football when you feel like it, but...
This sounds like justification of a really poor game.
It was a poor game,
down in my estimation.
No, USA are not a bad side. They've got players who play for Juventus, AC Milan, Chelsea, Arsenal, Leeds, Fulham, etc. They're always going to pose a problem for England last night. One thing I would say, though, is that he didn't change any of his team. I would have put Foden in as well, but he didn't change his team, which means that as soon as Greg Berhalter, the USA coach, sees that lineup and thinks, oh, they're going to play the same as Monday, they've got a chance to plan and tailor their approach accordingly. But having said that, England still had probably the best two chances. Harry Kane didn't look sharp enough. Was his ankle right? Was his foot right? I don't really know. But look, it's onwards and upwards. If you go and win the World Cup, nobody remembers what you do in the group stage.
Best player on the field was Harry Maguire. That's saying something about his...
Well, no, he's good. Well, he played well. Because he played well.
Yeah, he did, but he's a defender. He shouldn't be the best player in a game against the USA. Anyway.
USA, there you go. Coming in again, you're
Did you watch the football?
No, I watched I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and I'm so upset that Sean Walsh has gone home that I'm not watching it anymore.
Really?
No, Boy George
There's only 2 days to go, isn't there?
It ends tomorrow, but all my favourites have gone. All the ones with personality have gone.
Really?
I'm not having it. I'm not happy about that fit. We're both not happy
Matt
today, aren't we?
Hancock's still in.
How?
What did I tell you? What did
Esther
I tell you?
said all along, didn't you? We'll have to play that back.
Yeah. So who is he? He's not going to win, is he?
I hope not.
Who do you think could win?
I think it's going to be Jill, the football player.
Yeah.
That's who I'm going with. She seems a nice person.
Well, no, not only is she a nice person, I agree with that. That very first trial where you did the plank walk, I have to say, she was extraordinary at that. She just strove to the top of the plank, however many hundreds and hundreds of feet she was up in the air, jumped off the plank. No, and I don't think we saw enough of her doing the Bush Tucker trials, because Matt did steal the show, because most of the nation were wanting to see him.
He's toned down now. He's hardly doing anything. But you're right about Jill. She's got that athlete mindset, and I think that's...
Yeah, but what about... So how long has he got to... What's he got to do to win now? How long to go?
They're doing the cyclone tonight, and I'm living for that.
And then he'll get voted out tonight, is it?
There's one more tonight.
One more tonight. There you go, Phil knows. He's a showbiz reporter.
He knows more about I'm a Celeb than he does about the USA football team.
Oh, come on.
No, he's hot on his football.
I think... you don't think there's any... I just thought he might win.
Well... Let's hope not. I think it'll be Jill. Mark my words.
OK, you heard it here first.
Yeah,
now,
we love football.
We should mention, though, on the football, we should mention Wales, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we should. I mean,
they were pretty dire as well, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, but I just thought they panicked a bit. They thought everything's got to be based on beating Iran, otherwise we've got no chance. So they went for it, and they looked really flustered towards the end. The goalkeeper, Wayne Hennessy, comes out and just produces this foul on his opponent, which I just think was totally unnecessary. He almost like disembowels his opponent, and he gets... Originally, it's a booking, then he gets sent off. Yeah. And it puts them on the back foot.
It's difficult without a goalie, really, isn't it?
Well, no, they were allowed to bring another one on. They were allowed to bring another one, but they lost a player. But however, they then conceded 2 goals. If that was a lack of experience. Just pull things in, rein things in a little bit, tighten things up, take the point, go into the England game on Tuesday with 2 points and unbeaten under your belt. Now it looks very difficult for them. However, it's not impossible. Every team in that group now, the group of death as we're calling it, could still go through on Tuesday. So it's all intriguingly poised, as we like it here on GB News.
It's going to be massive, isn't it, when England play Wales next week?
Yeah, it will be big now, especially as Wales have got something to play for.
Bigger now than ever.
Yeah, no, indeed. Hayley, what else is happening apart from I'm a Celebrity?
Well, David Williams has left Britain's Got Talent. I don't know if you saw the reports a couple of weeks ago, but apparently he had said not very nice comments about the contestants. And I thought, probably he was just saying it in a funny way, but when I read what he had said, it was like awful comments.
But he wasn't saying them privately, wasn't he? I mean...
Well, he was saying it and he had his microphone still on, so I don't know if that got leaked out. But it was totally not acceptable, and he has stood down. I don't think he had a choice. But apparently, Oti from Strictly is meant to be replacing him. Have you heard that?
No.
That's because I'm a good showbiz reporter. I've got all the goss for you.
It is. And there's also other Strictly news, isn't there?
There is. Bruno is returning for the Christmas special, but apparently he's not actually dancing, he's singing. Who knew?
Singing?
Yeah, I know.
On a dancing show?
On a dancing show. So, yes, he's returning. He left Strictly because he had too much commitments in the US. There he is. And he got replaced by Anton de Beck. But I love Anton de Beck. I think he's a great judge. But, yeah, check out the Christmas special of Strictly this year. Will you be doing that?
Well, I'm more likely to be watching it than doing it.
You never know.
All I can say, thank goodness for that. Now, I've got my own little football question here. Oh. As I see I'd call it the sort of biggest football clubs with the biggest base of supporters.
Yeah.
Liverpool, Manchester United. Why are they both up for sale? What's that saying?
Well, it's well, it doesn't really say anything about the clubs necessarily, apart from they're extremely valuable. First of all, the reason they're up for sale is because the cost of borrowing has gone up so much. I think Liverpool alone borrowed £487 million. The cost of servicing that debt was quite manageable, and now it's just shot off into the stratosphere, and it's becoming a lot more expensive, not just to fund the club on a subsistence basis, but also invest it and take it where they want to go. I also think that United, in their instance particularly, had their ears pricked earlier in the year when Chelsea went for £4 billion, because if Chelsea's worth £4 billion, you can take it as read that both Liverpool and Manchester.
So it is about making money, selling out, making money.
Everything is in life.
I don't understand why the Glazers are
so unpopular. Is it not about love?
I don't know about that.
Why are the Glazers so unpopular? I mean, from what I can see, they've spent fortunes in the transfer market, just as much as anybody else would.
But they've effectively plunged. Well, no, they're not spending that much compared to other clubs.
Yeah.
Not really, no. Everything's relative.
They would have said it was completely debt-free as a business, and then they loaded it up. And that's what people were upset about. And then other people saw British football clubs as exactly the same thing.
That's the only club, because it's so valuable. That's the only club you could have bought. You could have achieved that kind of buyout.
They did it as leverage for all their
future profits.
Businesses.
Oh, you're a sports reporter.
Well, I'm interested in
I'm now the showbiz reporter. You're now the sports reporter.
You are. I'm interested in business and finance and money and what people were doing.
Yes. Also, in other news, A Place in the Sun. This is really sad. Johnny, he's been diagnosed with cancer, and unfortunately, the bosses said that he couldn't return. I have read that is for insurance purposes that he couldn't return. But I was actually watching the interview earlier today, and it was so upsetting to watch it, because he said not only has he had that awful news, he's also, hasn't got a purpose anymore. Someone's taken his job. He had to sit there and watch someone take his job on TV.
It seems quite heartless on the face of it, doesn't it?
But if you watch the interviews with him, it is so upsetting. We're told you've only got 6 months to live, so I find that a really touching story.
I'm quite sure they should have actually said, what can we do? A documentary together, you on your life, where you're going, maybe a place not in the sun, i.e. in the UK, so you haven't got maybe the insurance things, but they should be doing something. And I think the outpouring from the public about how badly you've treated a member of your staff should be a wake-up call for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it is quite shocking behaviour, because not only has he got to deal with that, I mean, he said his mental health just went down the drain. When he got told that news, he said his friend literally had to hold his hand to walk home because he was so distraught, and how he had to break that to his wife, and he's got 3 children. So you're right, there should be some kind of support, I feel. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, imagine how that would feel for anyone. So I felt that was very shocking to read, and I hope he does get more support.
Yeah.
Very sad indeed. So, come on, Aidan, who's going to win the World Cup now? You've seen all the teams play now, so who's,
Well, all I'm going to say, my smart money, and I got Brazil in the sweepstake. So I'm happy. I'm happy with Brazil. I think they've got an awesome squad. Don't get me wrong, I think England can do it as well. They can do some real damage in this tournament. There's a long way to go, but Brazil are probably the strongest I've seen. Also, the strongest teams, they're the ones who played the hardest opponents. They beat Serbia 2-0.
No, so that won't be the answer.
Well, I've got the sweepstake.
Yes, Esther. Yes.
I'll leave it to Phil and his expert knowledge of the USA football team.
You've taken over as a sports reporter. You've even been telling bad jokes as well. You've totally
Aidan, you won't be here next week.
I know. Don't worry. I'll say cheerio to everyone.
You totally will. You'll be here next week.
Yeah, but not the week after necessarily.
Hayley, you'll be here next week as well. Thank you both very much indeed. Well, thank you for joining us. What a fab, fun show it's been. And we'll be back next week on Friday and Saturday from 10 a.m. So do join us. But don't go anywhere, because up next is Alistair Stewart and friends.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app, and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News.